evening, and thank you for joining the latest New South Wales Farmers 30 by 30 webinar series, supporting our intent to grow New South Wales agriculture to a $30 billion industry by 2030. Tonight, it's my pleasure to welcome the Honourable Paul Toole, Minister for Regional Transport and Roads. From supply chain surety amid COVID restrictions, major roads and highways, inland rail, local roads and bridge upgrades, and heavy vehicle access, the discussion tonight is sure to deliver a lot for those keen to learn more about the New South Wales Government's plan for regional infrastructure. Good evening, my name's Pete Arkell and I'm the CEO of New South Wales Farmers. I'd firstly like to acknowledge the traditional custodians, both past and present, across the various lands on which we join this webinar tonight. I recognise their continuing connection to land, water and community. I'm joining from Gadigal land here in the north of Sydney. 30 by 30 is New South Wales Farmers' bold ambition to grow the value of agriculture in our state over the decade ahead, strengthening agriculture's contribution to both the New South Wales and the Australian economy. $1 out of every 10 of the value of New South Wales's exports comes from agriculture. And with our state and national economies hit hard by the impacts of COVID, ag export income will be critical as we look to build New South Wales back in the decade ahead. We had some really great news last week with ABARES forecasting that the Australian agricultural industry will reach a record of $72 billion this year. New South Wales is about 25% of that, so we're also heading for a record. With such a great crop on track to be harvested and farmers sourcing livestock from great distances as they rebuild their herds, a lot of farmers' minds are on the topic of regional infrastructure. Whether our road and rail will hold up in the months ahead and how we can efficiently and competitively navigate our export ports. Logistics are the single largest cost item in the production of many agricultural products. It's about 21% for horticultural growers, or a huge 27% of the costs for grain producers. Regional transport is a big deal for farmers in New South Wales. Unfortunately, hard infrastructure is expensive and it takes time to deliver. But what's important is that we as farmers and community members have confidence that the three levels of government can effectively work together to prioritise, to fund and to deliver the road and rail infrastructure that we so desperately need to support regional economic growth and also the resurgence we're seeing in regional tourism and indeed relocation. We're making some solid progress and I'd like to commend the work of Minister Toole and the New South Wales Government in a number of areas. Increased access for high productivity vehicles to the Renewal highway, reducing 4,000 truck movements in the last grain harvest, cutting red tape and primary producer registration requirements, and expansion to the grain harvest management system to make it easier to transfer grain from farms to silos and receival sites. That'll be critical in the months ahead. And as we look to transform New South Wales, the $2 billion commitment to the Great Western Highway upgrades that I'm sure the Minister will expand upon, transformational project. But there's more to do. New South Wales Farmers is really pleased that Minister Toole has agreed to join us tonight and to share his thoughts and to answer some of your burning questions. Thank you very much, Minister, for agreeing to engage with New South Wales Farmers members this evening and also our wider network of contacts that have joined us for tonight's webinar, nearly 100, I think. The Minister will make a few opening remarks, which will be followed by a question and answer session, which will be moderated by Lachlan Leeming from the Daily Telegraph. Thank you, Lachlan, for directing traffic this evening. Thank you to all those that submitted questions. We've had a really strong response to tonight's webinar. We have had to consolidate a few questions that have been on similar themes into single questions so we can get across all the different topics we hope to cover in this evening's session. I'd now like to warmly welcome Minister Toole. Thanks again for joining us tonight, Paul. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. And firstly, can I just say thank you for the invitation and to be able to come along here tonight and to be able to talk to all of you. So, look, there's no doubt that we've had some real challenges over the past couple of years. And when you have a look at us as a state right now, I mean, we're going through COVID and it's really good to see that there's some still really positive news that's coming out of the agricultural sector. And I can't remember seeing stock prices so high. We've seen new lambs down in Wagga last week hitting around $340. We've seen the Eki, it's been over 1,000 cents a kilogram for the last month. So pretty exciting news there with prices remaining so high in the ag sector. But also for me, the infrastructure space is so important. And I've got to say here in New South Wales, we're going gangbusters with infrastructure. If you have a look at our infrastructure spend, we've actually got a pipeline of $72.5 billion. And we've never seen so much money going out into the regions like we are now. Now, in this financial year alone, we'll spend more than $9 billion on regional transport and roads. And that's part of a record spend on transport infrastructure that's going to provide those services for us that are living in the bush. Now, in terms of game-changing projects that are in the pipeline, Pete's right, it's hard to go past the Great Western Highway upgrade. Now, it's a road that I travel on quite regularly. I know that it's, a difficult road. It's one that probably no one's really taken on before. And it's the last major highway that's still a single lane with within 50 kilometres of the Great Western Highway of Greater Sydney. And if you have a look at that, quite frankly, it's been left always in the too hard basket. So there's no question about that particular road, that we're dealing with a road that's got a narrow corridor, it's got steep topography, it's got sensitive environmental conditions to deal with, and we're trying to make sure that we preserve the heritage and the character of those villages that are in the Blue Mountains themselves as well. So we've actually had to think big on this project, and we're currently working through the assessment of what the central part of that project is going to look like. Now, if we go back, say, 6 months ago, I did announce that we were definitely locking in a tunnel under Mount Victoria, and we were locking in a tunnel under Blackheath. But in the meantime, I've also said that we want to think big. There's a missing part in the middle. And what we're looking at the moment is an 11-kilometre tunnel. And that would be Australia's longest road tunnel that we would have here in this country. And if we can pull that off, and we'll know by the middle of next year whether that 11-kilometre road tunnel is feasible or not, I'll tell you what, it's going to save a lot of time. It's going to make it safer. It's going to take out a lot of that congestion that people have to deal with each and every time. And our plan is to duplicate the road from Katoomba all the way through to Lithgow. It's going to reduce travel times. Anyone that goes there when it's a holiday weekend or even a weekend, they would know that traffic backs up. You can be backed up for kilometres. It can take you hours just to travel, a few kilometres. And that's why the New South Wales government in 2019 actually announced $2.5 billion towards that duplication of the road. Now, over the last 2 years, I've had numerous conversations with the federal government, and what's really pleasing is the fact that they've now got behind the project. And I just want to say a big thank you to both James and to Pete. I know that they threw the support of New South Wales farmers behind this project early on. They backed in our vision. They saw it, and the benefits that it was going to provide. I know that they had conversations with the federal government, and that's why we were pretty excited that when the feds announced, back in their budget this year, they announced $2 billion for the project. So this is a mammoth project, but it's certainly no pipe dream, and we're right on track to start construction towards the end of next year. Some of the other roads that I'll just mention as well are the Renewal Highway. I mean, that project and that highway has been transformed. We're actually delivering 40 new overtaking lanes on the length of that highway. And anyone knows that if you've been travelling on that road, you probably end up sitting behind some caravan that takes forever. So 40 overtaking lanes is going to make a big difference when it comes to movement of freight, just good for locals, just for people that are tourists passing through on the Renewal. We've now delivered 19 out of 40 overtaking lanes. Next year, very soon, we'll kick off the construction of the Parks Bypass. It'll be open to traffic in 2024. If you go further west, we've completed the sealing of the Silver City and Cobb highways, and they're the last dirt roads on the state highway network. And it's on track to be opened at the end of next year. Now, I went out there last year just to mark the completion of the sealing from Broken Hill to Tibooburra, and it's an absolute game changer for those communities. I spoke to the locals, and a lot of them said to me, I thought this would never happen in my lifetime. And I can just say to you, as the Minister responsible for regional transport and roads, the government's actually put a spotlight on the regions. So therefore, my whole focus is about transport and roads and rail projects that all matter to us living in regional New South Wales. That project itself, it's going to open up opportunities for tourism. It's good for locals. It's good for freight movements. And I tell you, it's just providing huge efficiencies. And if you have a look at the rainfall that we used to see in that part of the world before, a small amount of rain would actually close the road. So that's now, seeing the road when we've had recent rainfall events, the road itself is remaining open because it has been sealed. People are not getting bogged like they did previously. A couple of other projects, we've got the Muswellbrook bypass, the Singleton bypass. We've got upgrades that are occurring on the Princess Highway. So we want to transform the Princess Highway on the south coast the same way in which we've transformed the Pacific Highway on the north coast. If I have a look at some of the small projects as well, big projects to me always get the headlines, but some of the things that I'm most proud of are really the small projects, because these are the ones that drive big benefits, but they probably provide the biggest benefit in a local community. So we've got our $500 million Fixing Country Bridges program. That's helping councils to replace some of the state's oldest timber bridges with safer and stronger modern structures. So what we've got is some old timber bridges. They've been replaced with concrete structures. It's making them more resilient now to natural disasters. And these bridges now are able to carry heavier loads. They're able to make it easier for a farmer when it comes to efficient trips, and it avoids the need for long diversions. And I was up in Dungog, and I was there when I was announcing the project. I had a farmer that came along, and he actually told me that it would take him about an extra 20 kilometres because he couldn't use the bridge because it had a weight limit on it. So that costs money, that costs time. In my area in Lithgow, we're replacing about 3 bridges. The council itself saving around $100,000 a year just in maintenance on those particular bridges. In Blaney, I've got the locals there that tell me now they can actually take the Rural Fire Service truck across the bridge when they're going and fighting fires. Up on the Tweed, we've actually replaced some bridges there. Excuse me. Up in the Tweed, we've replaced some bridges there that actually services 25 farms, and every time there was a little bit of rainfall, they were just cut off. At Glen Innes, we're restoring access on the road that's been shut for 2 years because the bridge was falling apart, and that also created a diversion of around 30 kilometres. In that program, we've actually seen 420 bridges being replaced in round 1. And in the next couple of weeks, I'll be opening the second round of that program. And 420 bridges, I think I had about $280 million. I've got another round, and I want to use every dollar of that, $500 million, to make sure that we go as far as we can and do as many bridges as we possibly can. I've also got councils to package them up so that they can package them up and get a better deal so we can get more bridges done as well. Another program I'll just mention is our Fixing Local Roads program. And this is an important program because it's helped councils to repair, to maintain and to seal priority roads in the local communities. Now, this project's already seen around $400 million for about 360 projects. It's creating thousands of jobs across the state, and really it's helping councils to be employing contractors and subcontractors within the local area. And even last year when I was up north, I was talking to a farmer near Moree, and he has trucks that trucks hundreds of cattle along the Terry High Road, and he's thrilled that his program's going to seal another 6 kilometres of it. improving trips and reducing the wear and tear on his trucks. We have a look at freight efficiency. Freight efficiency is where we're working hard to improve connections to help you get your produce from the paddock to port and ultimately to the customer. Now, we've had projects like the recent upgrade to the rail line at the Port Newcastle, and that means that we're going to bring in longer trains, we can unload them faster, and it should actually translate to a saving of around $5 a tonne for farmers in the northwest. We've also increasing access for higher productivity vehicles. Only a few weeks ago, I announced that access would be opened up for all eligible vehicles up to 36.5 metres long and PBS level 3 vehicles along the full 1,000 kilometre length of the Renewal highway, where there were previously access restrictions at parks. We trialled the expanded road train access through the drought and again through last year's bumper harvest, and we know it's potentially reducing movements by as much as 40%. Look, there's no doubt that COVID has put up some real challenges, and a key focus for me and my team that are also online now has been to make sure that we keep freight moving. We want to make sure that we continue to move stock, we want to continue to move feed, and that essential supplies continue to flow into our communities. And that's been pretty challenging because we've actually had a national freight code where we've tried to deliver a national consistency of rules, but we've frequently seen other states make changes, they've shut borders. These have had massive flow-on impacts for those that have got to cross borders and to move freight and stock as well. And the other thing too is we appreciate that truckies can't just pull their B-double up to a residential community testing site, and that's why we've actually set up 11 freight-friendly testing sites across the state, and that's to help them meet the testing requirements that are placed upon them. So we just only in the last week opened another one up at Dubbo. We've also got one at Raglan on the Great Western Highway that's opening in about 10 days' time. And I know that we're looking at whether we can provide access to these sites for harvest contractors as well, and it's looking hopeful. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to use these sites for contractors as part of the transport task as well. So we'll continue to work with New South Wales farmers to ensure harvest contractors can safely use these sites as well. I'll leave it there, Pete or Lachlan, and I'll take questions if that's okay.
Great, thank you very much for that, Minister. Just to quickly introduce myself, my name's Lachlan Leeming. I'm the Urban Affairs reporter at the Daily Telegraph, but I'm actually born and bred in Parkes. So obviously Parkes plays a fairly key role in the Inland Rail, the investment there's it's for a mining town like that. It's great to see. So it's a cause close to my heart. And then I actually got my start at newspapers at Taree and Kempsey, which is, I guess, pertinent to this because you've got extensive road networks there, high rainfall, and they're busy roads during the holiday season. A lot of tourists hit those roads. So maintenance of those regional roads up on the North Coast and mid-North Coast has obviously sort of been a long-running issue. But we've got a fair few questions here, so we'll jump straight into it. And it's great to see we've already got some activity in the chat there, so we'll try and get to them as well. But we'll just see how we go with questions. And where else better to start than COVID-19? So our first one here, Minister, is: has there been an increase in COVID testing sites across regional areas for road freight drivers? And following from that, are contract harvest drivers included in the National Freight Code? And if not, what requirements will we put in place for those drivers?
Yeah, good question. And it's probably just the last point that I just made. So we've got 11 freight-friendly testing sites across the state. So we've identified key major routes where freight moves. So we're the only state that's probably delivering that amount. I've got to be quite honest. I mean, Victoria and Queensland haven't actually delivered anywhere near the size or the capacity that we've done in these freight-friendly testing sites. We also found that when some of the regimes changed in other states, they were using our testing facility. So all of a sudden, in some cases, we had a 3,000% increase in truck operators, freight operators pulling up at these sites and wanting to be tested. We also know that there's different testing regimes. So if you come from Greater Sydney and you go out into the regions, you've got to be tested every 7 days. If you come from Victoria, you've got to be tested every 3 days. And, you know, we've got 11. As I said, we can actually share them with New South Wales farmers, all of those sites. The other thing that we're doing is we are working whether or not we can actually have contractors. Obviously, grain harvesting is going to be a big issue coming up, and there's going to be some big bumper crops. So we're working through transport right now to see, as part of the freight network, we can actually allow grain harvesters and contractors to be able to use these facilities. So we'll continue to work with New South Wales farmers, and if we can make that happen, we'll certainly get that information out to you. But we actually started with 5 freight-friendly testing sites. We've now got 11. So we have seen a dramatic increase in that area.
Thank you, Minister. That flows on quite well to the next question, which is there are significant concerns about delays at state border checkpoints. What have you negotiated to reduce transport disruptions for grain and livestock carriers, and especially for when the northern harvest commences?
Yeah, so what we've actually done is we've tried to have a dedicated freight lane, and that's probably been a lot of conversations with my counterparts in other states, trying to make sure that we don't have freight and, you know, light vehicles sitting in the same lane, because that actually, you know, we know a lot of freight's perishable at the end of the day. We've got stock on them as well, so we need those dedicated freight lanes. That's always been a bit of a challenge, but we've been able to achieve that in most cases, whether that's been Queensland or whether that's been the Victorian border as well. So that's probably been our main focus, that we've been able to negotiate with the other states about having a dedicated freight lane for the movement of stock and other freight produce across the state.
Okay, excellent. I think we'll all be relieved to know that's the last of this sort of COVID-focused questions. I don't know about everyone else, but I'm pretty sick of COVID by now. But we'll move on to major roads and national highways and the work that's being done with those in the bush. So the New South Wales and Australian governments have committed more than $2 billion for the Great Western Highway duplication. What's the timeline for this project and the commencement of the proposed tunnel?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the state government's kicked in $2.5 billion. That was kicked in, at the start of the 2019 election. What we've been doing over the last 2.5 years, we've been working on the east and the western end of the line. So that's probably, for those that are familiar, that'd be the road through Little Hartley, which is from Lithgow through to the bottom of Mount Vic. We've also been working on the road on the eastern end, which is around Medlow, Bath. So all that design, environmental work has been taking place. We've actually been also now working on the middle section, which is the tunnel, but we're expecting work to begin on the east and the western sections of the road at the end of next year, and the tunnel starting the year after. So we're pretty keen to keep that momentum going. The thing is, with any major road project, you've still got to do your environmental studies. There's land acquisition, there's environmental factors there that make it much more sensitive project. But what we're doing is we're trying to do it in the stages so we don't hold any of it up and get on with it. It probably will take 5 to 6 years to be able to build the project. So again, we have got $4.5 billion already on the table. I've told the feds that this is a road of national significance. This should be funded very similar for other major roads where we've got 80-20. And again, we've got $4.5 billion. I'd probably say to you in total, and we don't need the money yet because we've got enough to sort of really get on with what we need to. But it probably will be around about an $8 billion project in total.
Thanks, Minister. And I guess this follows on quite well with that. Was one of our viewers says the Great Western Highway duplication will end up with a 60-kilometre speed limit remaining in a section. Is that correct?
So that person might be talking about the section at Medlow Bath. So, we've still got some communities whereby, there are still towns that we go through. I travel it all the time, and I can tell you right now, the frustration is all the speed zone changes. So I get it. We go 60, 70, 80. We want a consistent speed through the mountains. If we get a consistent speed, then that's going to be, what is required on that highway. But again, I put it this way, that project is one that nobody's wanted to tackle. Everybody wants to go and do other road projects. We're done north, we're doing south, but no one wanted to come near this one. And if we really want to have a highway, we've got to go and actually invest in this road. So technology now allows us to think differently and to do things differently. But again, we've got to think of speeds too when you're entering and exiting tunnels as well. You've got to think about, lighting in tunnels, operational costs of tunnels. So there's a whole list of factors that need to be considered as part of the construction there. But again, I would say that road is going to continually change. I'll make the point too, Lachlan. Some people ask me about the Bells Line of Road as well. Well, the Bells Line of Road is a road that we're still investing in. We're still going to continue to make improvements into that road. We've seen about $50 million, and that delivered, probably, around 6 overtaking lanes. But I don't see that investment stops, because I think it's still important to have the Bells Line of Road there as well. Is it going to be a highway? Yep, maybe, but it's a long-term picture. It's not going to happen in the short to medium term. That goes through World Heritage Area, and that's going to be a major project, and it's going to have a lot of environmental delays and as well that would be needing to be factored in. So this is what is needed. Otherwise, we'll be sitting here and talking about it in another 20 years, and we wouldn't have started. So pretty keen to make sure that the investment happens and we get on with it.
And Minister, on the flip side of the coin, is there any chance we could see a stretch of 130k road?
Yeah, good try, but I'd have to say that's very ambitious. So I'm struggling with some of the communities to even get it to 100 kilometres through the Hartley Valley too. So look, there are different views, and I think I appreciate that. Whenever there's a major road project, there's always different views that are expressed from various sides about what is needed, and there's plenty of engineers at the end of the day that know better than the engineers that are actually building roads every day. But look, we take all those factors into consideration and try and come up with something that works for everybody.
Thanks, Minister. I just thought I'd try my luck on that one, so well handled.
That was your question.
So moving on, so now with the Renewal Highway, there are significant resources being allocated to overtaking lanes on that highway. However, there's an ongoing concern about the safety of feeder roads that are primarily used for freight. What is being done to improve safety at these intersections? For example, heavy vehicles entering west of parks.
Yeah, look, it's a good question, and I think I think it's like any major road. We end up doing the spine, and then we do come back and do intersections because we find that there's a change in the way in which vehicle movements occur. I mean, I've got this same debate right now. I mean, I always say, are you ever finished building a road? No, you're not, because Pacific Highway is a classic example. Anyone that's traveled it knows that it's a fantastic road. It's transformed the North Coast. It's made it safer. It's opening up tourism benefits. It's great for freight, all of that. But do you finish there? No, you don't, because you've now got all of these intersections that you've got to come back to because of the way in which people have moved and changed the way in which they travel as well. So, it doesn't end there. It's part of our investment, though, in road safety. We've got the Parks bypass, which, you'd be familiar with, but that Parks bypass is critical as well, just to have those road trains that we're going through town. The railway crossings there we're impacting too. So that's going to make a big difference there in that particular area. So, we'll always continue to invest in roads, try and make them safer as well. But, again, we're always looking at improvements where we can as well. And I don't say that we do the Renewal highway and then we come back to it completely. We'll look at ones if they need to be upgraded safely beforehand as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Minister. And I guess sort of on the same track is this next question asks, the increased use of electric vehicles has a potential to significantly reduce revenue from fuel levies. What is the New South Wales government position on road user charges and how would they be applied?
Yeah, look, I think there's still a lot of work to go in that space. I don't think anyone's really determined how that model's going to look. I can tell you, as the Minister for Regional Regional Transport, I can tell you that, I want to make sure that farming vehicles, are exempt from that. I don't want to see someone being charged that has a vehicle that they use on their farm, for having a road user charge. So, I'm a very strong advocate in relation to making sure that that doesn't happen. I know that, that's been raised potentially before, but the government's made it clear that, road users charges won't be, impacting on farmers or farm vehicles that are used as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Minister. And this is an interesting one as well, with more, and this stays on the electric vehicles and sort of the growing use and design of them. But it appears more automotive manufacturers are moving towards electric vehicles. Is the New South Wales government looking at infrastructure projects to support regional communities so they don't miss out? Because obviously there's a lot of logistical challenges with electric vehicles in the bush and the outback.
Yeah, look, it's absolutely correct. I mean, we've been working with, there's an investment as part of the electric vehicle strategy about having charging stations being rolled out into regional communities. So we've also got the proposal for charging stations to be every 100 kilometres on major highways and major roads as part of the investment that is occurring there. So regional communities won't be forgotten there. In relation to electric vehicles, do I think that that's going to be the solution necessarily in all the parts of regional New South Wales? I'll probably say no, because I think hydrogen technology is also showing that instead of electric vehicles, we might actually be better equipped to having hydrogen vehicles, and that could be the technology that we might see on, buses, for example. So I think that's another factor. I think technology will change so quickly that we'll find that, this conversation in 2 years' time could be very different to even what it is today and what the thinking might be around it. But the government is also very mindful to make sure that the electric vehicle infrastructure is rolled out into the regions. And that's why the charging stations are part of that strategy into regional New South Wales.
Excellent. Thank you, Minister. And now, so we're going to move on now into the funding by local government for road maintenance and upgrades. Or funding to local government rather, sorry. So a major commitment in the 2019 election was for regional road upgrades and timber bridge repair replacement, which I know you mentioned at the start. What criteria is being used to prioritise these projects? And is that commitment on track?
So I'll tell you a couple of ones. The first one is the Fixing Country Bridges program. So $500 million, round one, 420 bridges of about $280 million. Every project that was applied for by councils that was eligible received funding. So no one missed out unless it was a project that didn't fit the guidelines. And out of 420, I'm just guessing here roughly, there might have only been a handful. So they might have been lucky if there was 10 to 15 that actually missed out. But that might have been because there might have been a heritage bridge or the condition of the bridge wasn't in a state that actually needed to be replaced. We do put an emphasis on the rating. So they're all assessed, obviously looking at vehicle movements. We look at resilience. So areas that have been impacted by fires and floods, as well, to see those bridges being replaced. So that's been a pretty good program. We've got the next round, as I said, that'll open in a couple of weeks' time. So that's going to see the next part of this program. I did set a criteria though. What I wanted to make sure was that councils didn't get the money and then sit on the money. And then in 4 years' time, I'm asking the councils to tell me where their projects are up to. So the proviso was, once you got your deed and signed it, you have to deliver the bridges within a 2-year period. So that was part of the criteria about making sure that we created jobs in the local area, but it was also about making sure that these bridges that are important to so many in the community are delivered in a timely manner. Now, the next round, I will actually have the same criteria. They will need to be delivered in the next 2 years as well. So again, that'll be part of the delivery of the program. I can say as the minister, and I've been in local government, so I know exactly how they work. I can tell you that it frustrates me knowing that the community is missing out on funding that has been given to a council and they are not spending it and they are not delivering the improvements that are needed. I mean, the bridge one, imagine those farmers that I spoke to that have to travel, 20 extra kilometres or 20 or 30 extra kilometres because they couldn't use a bridge because of the weight limit. You've got emergency vehicles that can't use a bridge because of a weight limit. So again, if we want to see the benefits, we've got to see the projects being delivered. So as part of the criteria, councils have got to really be ready to go within a 6-month period. The Fixing Local Roads program, Lachlan, that's a great question too, because that program, we've spent $400 million, but in that particular program, I got the feds to kick in $200 million as well. So it's actually nearly become a $700 million program in total. So I'll give you a heads up, this week, sometime, I'm going to be announcing the next round of funding to local councils. And again, councils have to deliver the projects within a time frame. I've got 2 years on the delivery of these projects as well. Councils could actually put them into small packages of up to $1 million, because sometimes, councils will look at it and they go, oh, we want to do the big project, which is going to be $20 million. Well, I set a limit on it of $5 million a round for a major road, so they can go back and have a couple of bites each time the round comes up, or they can package it up to $1 million. And there's a lot of councils that actually found that more attractive, because they've got a lot of small projects. They might need to just do some sealing or just some maintenance work or some repair work on that road for the local community, and that will deliver a greater benefit. And what I hear from the locals when I move around is the fact that now I've got a good, decent road that I can travel on, get to work, get to the shops, get to the the school and back home again safely, and that's what it's about. And this is helping councils with their maintenance backlog. So trying to reduce the maintenance backlog that councils have got.
Excellent. Thank you, Minister. And we've come to the first of our questions here from New South Wales Farmers members. So we've got William Stevens of Durangle, and I hope I pronounce that right, because I get a bit embarrassed if I hear of a town that I haven't heard of before out in the bush. So hopefully I got that right. But Mr. Stevens has asked, he's said, rural roads are a total disaster. What can be done about funding? Snowy Monaro Regional Council is totally unable to grade our roads. We need urgent help. Minister, what would you say to Mr. Stevens?
Yeah, I think it's up to councils at the end of the day to put an application fund in when these programs open up. I mean, I can't do it for the council. These are local roads. They're under the care and the responsibility of the local councils. What I've actually done is provide a mechanism on top of the council budget where they can apply for additional funding for priority roads. Now, probably for Mr. Stevens or any other listener online, if you actually feel that road is a priority, you need to make sure that you lobby the council to make sure that road is put forward as their priority, because I know that councils put forward road projects, but they might tell the locals that their road's a priority, but that is not the project or the road that they have put forward in the grant application. So it mightn't be a bad idea to ensure that you put forward the proposal to the council about putting in funding for that particular road in a future grants program. Let's not forget too, this is state, but the feds also do give money to councils as well. There's been money that's been given to councils through drought and natural disaster recovery as well. So there's been additional funding there that has been given directly to councils for our road infrastructure that they could put into that road. I'll probably be honest in some ways and say that there's no doubt that, and if I just go away from that particular road at the moment, it's been challenging with the wet weather that we've had. A lot of our roads have really copped a beating, and it's, our maintenance teams have, obviously been restricted a little bit with COVID, but we've got a big job when those teams are on the ground getting out there and just fixing our own roads as well. So I can appreciate councils with their road network, but again, we've provided a mechanism there for councils to be able to tap into funding to be able to assist them.
Thank you, Minister. That sort of leads into this next question as well. So this one asks, it appears that the majority of funding to local government is delivered through those annual applications or by tendering. This leads to short-term planning rather than a long-term strategy. Why isn't there more certainty for local councils over that long-term funding, and how could this be rectified?
Yeah, look, some councils have, regional maintenance contracts as well that they have from the government too. So there are a number of roads and regional roads that local councils are responsible for as well, and they are guaranteed a funding as well from the state government. What we really need is councils to be able to come up with a long-term transport plan for their local area, and they need to be identifying what their roads are. The problem is, in a lot of cases, it's just ad hoc. So there's no real strategic planning around what the road network looks like, where a community might have grown, where they might, have seen future development in that area. I mean, we're happy to, through transport, we're happy to help councils that need that support, whether that be through project management or whether that be through planning or even putting in applications. But again, councils themselves have got to really put forward a strategic plan around the road network and what they actually want to deliver for their community.
Great, thank you for that, Minister. This one, a slightly different topic, but still very much the same subject. The high productivity vehicle trial on the Renewal has been welcomed, and it has delivered time and cost improvements. What other major roads can be opened up to deliver the same benefits?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think because we've been able to show how successful it has been on the Renewal Highway, I'm actually open to suggestions, because I actually think because this has been so successful on the Renewal Highway, I think there's other highways that we can actually roll this out on. So if probably New South Wales Farmers, believes that there are other routes that we should consider, I'm happy to look at that. But I also want to make sure that the route itself, the infrastructure that we've got is able to manage and to be able to cope with those longer vehicles as well. I mean, you're right, we're talking about 36.5 metre long vehicles, and these vehicles are reducing costs. They're actually moving more freight, and I'll tell you what, it's been pretty important in COVID as well to have trucks with greater capacity rather than actually have more trucks on the road out there. So it is good. We've got a farm gate trial that's also rolling as well, with trialing with some of the heavier vehicles as well. So again, if there's some suggestions from New South Wales Farmers, I'm happy to take on board what roads they think we should consider as well, and we can have a look at that.
I'm sure New South Wales Farmers like the sound of that. Thank you, Minister. Another member question here. This is from Ben Watts out at Molong. He asks, is there a review of funding through Investment New South Wales to align projects with increased productivity and improved profitability?
Ask the question again, Lachlan. Sorry.
So Ben has asked, is there a review of funding through Investment New South Wales to align projects with increased productivity, improved profitability?
Well, there's not. So probably the simplest answer is there's not, but we're always trying to, Infrastructure New South Wales, they do a lot of work around, assurance on major projects to ensure that the work that is delivered is basically bang for buck at the end of the day. So a lot of that work, is done through potentially Infrastructure New South Wales, and that might be for our major projects or bigger projects we see happening in the regions. But it'd be more of an assurance task that they would have a look at undertaking.
Sure. Okay. No worries. Well, thank you for that, Minister. We'll jump over now to heavy vehicle access in regional centres and the Grain Harvest Management Scheme. So the success of the Grain Harvest Management Scheme depends on the approval of local council road managers. Given the predictions for a record grain harvest this year, what is the New South Wales government doing to ensure expanded access for grain transport to receival sites? For example, to improve access to the grain terminals in the Narrabri Shire.
Yeah, so obviously we agree. There's going to be a big harvest again, and that Grain Harvest Management Scheme is absolutely critical. So critical to industry. We'll work with industry. We'll work with the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator. We actually want to make sure that we can maximise, the benefits there, but obviously around road safety, sustainability, the economic benefits. We've been working through with the industry, with local road managers, NHVR, as I said. We want to extend the drought recovery initiatives that we've seen successfully work before. So Transport currently is doing an evaluation of the drought recovery initiatives. We've got road train access through parks. I'd have to have a look at around Narrabri. I'm not 100% sure, but again, we want to make sure that there is access provided like we have done in the past, because we know how critical that has been, and we know the benefits and the difference that has made in local areas as well. And again, we don't want to see red tape and our farmers being impacted by not having this access that they deserve and need. So we'll do what we can again. It's worked before, and I think we can do it again.
Excellent. Thank you, Minister. We're going to shoot on now to a few questions on regional rail and then inland rail. So I guess for regional rail, firstly, New South Wales Farmers is calling for reflective material on all rolling rail stock and lights on all rail engines. Is this something you support, and what would you do to help New South Wales farmers achieve this?
Yeah, look, I think it's level crossings to me, whether it's level crossings, whether it's trains, I want to do something in this space. And I want to make it very clear that I met with a young lady probably about 3 months ago, and she highlighted to me some of the issues around level crossings, the issues with some of our trains. And if we're going to have, reflective lights, whatever it might be on our trains, there's a lot of trains out there. We really need a federal initiative for that to occur. We need that to be standardised across the board. So we can't just go and say one particular company, you've got reflective lights. We actually need this to be standardised right across the board. If you have a look at our level crossings, for example, I think we've done 59 major upgrades in the last 10 years. We've got another 29 major upgrades that are earmarked for the next 2 years. That's going to have improvements to the LED lighting, the reflective lighting, the boom gates, all of that. But I actually don't think that's going to be, to me, the solution that's going to improve those crossings. I think it's going to be technology. I think, the way in which we can get technology on our phones today with certain apps, alerting us to, a school zone. I actually think there's possibilities of being able to get apps, whether that be through, our phone, through our car, to be able to alert us that a level crossing is coming up. We know that a lot of our fatalities have occurred on crossings. I think it's 30% of our fatalities occur around where there's crossings of 100 kilometres in those areas. We have reduced the speed on about 15 already over the last 2 months. We've reduced the speed to around 80 kilometres an hour, trying to improve the safety at those level crossings. We have a very specific policy that we try and avoid new rail crossings in New South Wales, and wherever possible, we'll try and actually close public or private rail crossings that are no longer needed. So where they're no longer practical, I think it's important that we close them if they're not needed any longer. It's a conversation that I've actually had with the Deputy Prime Minister, Barnaby Joyce, about this. I've actually met with some families that have been impacted by fatalities at level crossings, and it's something that I'm really keen to actually take up, and something that I'm really keen to see improved in this space as well. But again,
thank you. Sorry, Minister, I don't mean to cut you off, but we're just going to try and get a few last questions in just before we finish up for the night. So I'm sorry to cut you off, but
no, I'll be short. I'll be shorter then.
No, no worries, not a problem. No, it's great to hear you've talked to, because as you said, they can be a real source of heartbreak for people in the regions, these level crossings, and it's great to hear you've talked to the Deputy PM about it. We'll move on here to Inland Rail. So that's another federal project, but given that it bisects New South Wales as a freight corridor and significantly impacts local communities, what have you and your department done to ensure that this provides economic benefit to New South Wales and it's not just passing through?
Yeah, look, we're obviously looking at opportunities where there can be, off the inland rail. So, we keep talking to the federal government about, those branch lines that potentially have possibility off the inland rail. I've got to be clear too, Lachlan, on behalf of communities as well, it's also about making sure and as you rightly said, it's a federal project, but I also want to make sure that there is, grade separation. So where you've got that interface between rail and road, that we're not creating another hazard or another risk. So I think we've got about $187 million at the moment to be able to upgrade those interfaces. The route selection at the end of the day is chosen by the federal government. Our role is to make sure that, issues around safety, around maintenance standards, around, reducing road network impacts, improving rail connectivity is all important. So we want to continue to advocate for that, because we also know that, from a domestic and a port point of view, they are critical with the inland rail development for New South Wales as well.
Thank you, Minister. That leads us on to one of our might be one of our last questions, but we'll see how many more we can get in. But as the responsible minister, are you aware that ARTC, on behalf of Transport for New South Wales, has already commenced compulsory land acquisition processes in greenfield areas of the track, despite none of these areas yet having planning approval to proceed? How do you explain the legality of that approach to landholders?
Yeah, so I am, as I probably wrapped it up in my last answer, was, I understand that the route is decided by the federal government. So there is a process in relation to acquisition of property that must be undertaken, and there's a lawful process that has to be undertaken as well. So you can't just come in and just say, we're just taking that piece of land at the end of the day. So again, it is the federal government that is responsible for the selection of that route and where it is going to go. But again, they do have legal processes that they have to abide by and follow for acquisition of land. And again, individuals would certainly be aware of that. But I would also say that the federal government would also be aware that it's a big project for them. I mean, this is obviously a multi-billion-dollar project that they're sort of keen to proceed with. So they're very, keen to make sure that they're not got stumbling blocks along the way. I know that's always challenging, as I said previously, on major projects, but again, they would have to go through acquisition processes in the legal framework that they're bound by.
Excellent. Thank you, Minister. And I've just got one last question on the rail. So this is from Donna Reigate of Canandra. So she's asked, she's keen to hear the government's plans to improve freight and passenger links between the Parks Inland Rail and ports. So Sydney Airport, seaports at Botany, Port Kembla and Newcastle. So is there plans in place to improve that freight link between, say, the Parks terminal and the New South Wales ports there?
Yeah, I can't give Donna a specific one on that particular line, but I mean, I'll be very honest in this area. We actually want to make a lot of improvements in relation to rail. I mean, as the Minister, I can tell you right now, we've actually introduced 4 passenger services over the last 2.5 years, services that weren't operating, for decades. So I can tell you right now, we've actually put in passenger trains. I've also, on the main Western Line, for example, we've actually got a $45 million development that's been going on there. We've got another 4 passing loops that have just been completed. One's about to open at Pinecliff. We've had one at Polona that's just opened as well. But when I talk about a passing loop, these are important investments on the rail line, because they allow passenger trains or freight trains to be able to move to the side to allow those faster trains to be able to go past. And that means that we can get more, produce on the line that's getting them to the markets in a more timely manner. So again, whether it's north, south, east, all of those lines are critical. The other one too is the Cowra lines. I've got the work being done now for the Cowra lines. That's that Blaney to Demondra line that some people may be familiar with. It's been closed for decades, and it's a particular line that, when the main Western Line is at capacity, we're going to need that line. So it doesn't stack up today. It might be 5-10 years away. But what I've done is I've actually started the work now to make sure that we know what the investment is needed into the future. So we know what the cost of it is to replace the line, replace the bridges, so that I've got projects like that basically in my back pocket to be able to know that, hey, when it is ready in 5 years' time, that we can actually go to the feds or go to the state or whoever it might be to say, hey, we know what has to happen. This is the investment that is needed for this particular project. So, we are investing in, a lot of improvements in freight productivity. Rail is going to see a continual increase, and we're going to have to make sure that continues to occur as well. So pretty keen, not only for road, but also rail as part of my role as the Minister.
Minister, that's all the questions I think we have time for today. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure New South Wales farmers do as well. And thank you again. And I'll hand us over to President James Jackson.
Yes, thank you very much, Lachlan, and thank you, Minister Toole, on behalf of all the farmers in New South Wales, for your insights and your time this evening. And it's good to hear your perspective on that 30-30 vision of New South Wales farmers through that infrastructure lens, if you like. I think the Great Western Highway, I've got to say, is a piece of genius getting that up. I mean, I think that's been around for about 30 years, and actually tackling something that it is difficult. And as you said, looking at through some new tech and whatnot is great. And Paul, on one of our first meetings, Minister Toole did ask me to go down to Canberra and lobby for some money for this. And we did. And I was surprised how receptive, actually, Michael McCormack was. Actually, he was pretty switched on to the possibilities of it. But also thanks for that work on the Renewal Highway, because we saw with the drought and some of the challenges that we've had in agriculture, the importance of those high productivity vehicles and getting the cost of that logistics effort down, for moving stock and fodder and our produce to the ports, as you rightly identified. So thank you for that work. A big thanks tonight to Lachlan Leeming for facilitating this conversation so seamlessly, Lachlan. So thank you very much. And a special thanks to New South Wales Farmers members and the wider community for taking part in the conversation tonight. Infrastructure is a very critical part of our businesses. Now, it'd be remiss of me not to put an ad on the end of this, and this is certainly for the New South Wales farmers and the value of New South Wales Farmers membership. We do annoy, ministers like Minister Toole, who gives us very good access and a very good reception. It's always a joy to see you, Minister Toole. But for our voice to be heard by state government and for our voice to be heard by federal government, that collective voice is more powerful. And it couldn't be more powerful than all those mayors of the Central West who, as soon as I got the job in New South Wales Farmers president, somehow they found my phone number and started lobbying me on behalf of their constituents for this tunnel through the improved access through the Blue Mountains. So everybody is delighted, I would suggest. So New South Wales Farmers is on track to record its 5th year of membership growth, and I'd encourage people on the call tonight to consider join us and get that collective voice going. So once again, thank you very much for Minister Toole for participating tonight. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, and thanks for having me.